Welcome to Nyaso. We're very, very pleased to have you join us. Today, we are going to talk about Black history, particularly with a focus on African American and the diaspora history. Black excellence through it all, and it is a lot. It is a very painful history and present. The beginning. When reviewing some of the slave journey records, it said that some of the people were taken from a place called Wida or Judah. When you go back to that time, here there is Judah and Wida had a king. There was a king Hafan who reigned from 1708 to 1727. The continent of Africa was organized in various kingdoms, and there were kings who ran their kingdom. And there were people who were skilled metal workers, there were people who were skilled fishermen, teachers, leather workers, builders. There were communities that functioned, people had families, they had cultures and practices, and lived a life, a fruitful life. Here in the center, it shows the coronation of the king of Wida or the king of Judah. And there you can see there's an assembly and there's a wall and there's some very tall houses and there's a shed and there's someone has an umbrella and people are sitting down and there's a coronation. It was organized, and even beyond that, you can see some other buildings on the outskirts, which is contrary to the view that many would have us believe about the continent. And here there's a map which shows the coast of West Africa, the Gulf of Guinea, right to Benin, and right in there, you have Kingdom of Judah or Wida. And this insertion of slave coast, that would have been after Europeans came and started taking people away, because even down here in small print, you see Wida or Judah. So this area was known to be the Kingdom of Judah or Wida. These are some people from that area in modern day clothes, costumes. They look like pipers, very beautiful. So if you imagine back to the coronation of the king, this type of color, all the color and all the customs and all the culture, and here you have a replica of the king with a staff, with his clothing. So these things existed, and hopefully one day in time, there would be as more people get more information about these African kingdoms, can shed some more light, and as they're very good at making movies, perhaps we can have something which should be absolutely beautiful to see. So that was the beginning. People lived their lives, they had families, they had work, they had various things that they did. Some were royals, some were nobles, some were ordinary people. The next thing you know, along come some people from other parts of the world, primarily Europe, who come to kidnap people into slavery. And how did we know that some people were kidnapped? Because this article is from Thoughts and Sentiments on the Evil of Slavery and Other Writings. So if you have access to that book, this is just an excerpt of it, where the biography of a gentleman called Kuagano. He was born on the east coast of present-day Ghana about 1757 in the fancy village of Agimakwe or Ajumako. In 1770, when he was about 13, he was kidnapped by fellow Africans, sold into slavery to Europeans, and transported to Grenada. So this just goes to show that there was kidnapping, there was selling to slavery, and it would be difficult to even imagine if people understood what their fellow countrymen were going to face once they got into slavery, because the type of slavery imposed by Europeans was really unprecedented on the scale and just the level of cruelty. But in Grenada, so there are, people are doing the ancestry DNA, but there are a bunch of Ghanaians, all types of Africans were scattered throughout the world, as it were. So if you haven't opted in to read this article, please do. The next item we have is a record from slave ships. So there is a website called slavevoyages.org, and there's a record which I had not found before until we started doing this research, and it shows it's got 95,153 entries. That is a lot. These are individual entries of people who were captured and taken into slavery. It has their names, language group, the age. This was heartbreaking, the age. We'll come to that later. The sex, the height, the name of the ship, and where this got them from. So port, embarkation port. And you can see this is Ouidah, Judah. So if we go back to the beginning, hence, so these people around about that time were in that kingdom of Judah, where they had kings and they had their functions and they had their activities. And they were disembarked in Freetown, which is in Sierra Leone. We'll come to that as well later. So here we have memories of an enslaved person. And there they say, when I was 6 years old, I waited in the house of my master. So these people who were taken into slavery, kidnapped, sold, taken on these vessels to slavery, they got to their destination. This is a child saying, when I was 6 years old, so at age 6, they were already a domestic servant at age 6. At age 9, they were put out to look after cattle. And this would be outside, hot, hard work, incredible hard work, and just horrendous conditions. And at age 12, in midday, went to looking after the cattle, had to kind of hide in the shade from the sun. And I saw millions of souls. Oh, I think he was having a vision, a dream. On one occasion, he said that he happened to lose a shoe, lose a boot, to be precise, belonging to the groom. He lost a shoe. And as punishment, they made him walk without shoes all winter long. So he lost a shoe. He's a mere child. And as punishment, the wickedness, how people can look upon a human being, upon a child, and beat people so mercilessly, and make a child walk without shoes all winter long. And this is Memoirs of Boston King. No matter what's the climate, it wouldn't have been pleasant. But the fact that the word winter is used, there is snow on the ground, there is snow on the ground, and having to be, especially tending cattle, even if you weren't tending cattle, there's snow on the ground. Before you walk a few feet, your feet will be frozen, frostbite. The man of wickedness, just the people sold into slavery and taken did not. It's only by God's divine nature that people survived, because these conditions are so inhumane that you don't think the human body can cope and survive, not even mentioning the mental health. And here it says, I was beat in the most unmerciful manner. This is a person who's gone without shoes all winter long. So if that person's saying, I was beat in the most unmerciful manner, you know that was like a near death. So if you have a moment, check out these sources and do additional research, because the more we learn, the more we understand. So now let's move forward. So slavery continued. The last slave ship was in 1860. 1860 is merely 40 years away from 1900. So it's a matter of 160 years ago, which is not that long ago, not in one bit. So the last transatlantic slave ship in 1860 also left from Kingdom of Judah. They have been taking people from that area for so many years. It is surprising that there was anyone left. And furthermore, when a country is depopulated deliberately, because that's a depopulation exercise, they went, they took people, they went back to the same place and took more people, they went back to the same place. There must be devastation, and the preference, they were taking a lot of the men, they also took women and children. They took the young, because when you look upon the ages, that people were not 50 years old, people were young. So they took generation, they probably stole a whole generation. We carry on. So here, this is the absolute brutality of slavery. So there, having stolen people and branded them before they left with hot iron, knowing how painful it is when you are ironing clothes and your hand accidentally touches the hot part of the iron and it singes and you pull back quickly. Imagine people deliberately knowing how much that hurts when they themselves are touched with anything hot and they choose to brand another human being. The devil must have hurt their hearts. That's all I can say. So they get there and they take children, separate families, and there's someone holding someone's baby and some woman pleading, and they say, and look at this with a whip. It was incredible. So 1 minute, these were people from a kingdom. Some of them would have been nobles. Some of them would have been ordinary people doing their thing. Next, they're stripped of all their dignity, branded, packed on a boat, ship, with the details here, treated ridiculously poorly, brutally, cruelly. Then even worse was yet to come, which you couldn't even imagine. Someone taking their child away from them, separating families. The next picture shows a woman chained to a girl and a man in irons at work in a field. So all these little children they stole from these kingdoms in Africa so they can have free labor. They chained them. The thing is that these people don't seem to have shoes. And when you have a metal on a hot day, the metal absorbs heat. So if you have a metal on a hot day, that metal is going to feel as though you have a hot iron next to your flesh. And that hot iron, which I'm sure weighed a ton, not only would it, for instance, the lady is pulling down on your neck, your muscles will be hurting, but also the heat from the sun will be making that metal burn into your flesh. And the child, and the man with giant spikes on it. The devil must have given people ideas, because these ideas are so contrary to the human desire to reach out and help, to reach out and see a child as a child with compassion, that someone thought it was fitting to put human beings, my ancestors, in chains and treat them like that. Looking at another set of slave records from the slave voyage records here, you see the ages. I just noted there was someone 8 years old, female, from the Kingdom of Judah, disembarked at Freetown, Sierra Leone, and sent out from Sierra Leone. So it appears that there were a few spots at the time where people like Sierra Leone, there were ships coming, there were ships going. And so this girl was taken from Judah, Kingdom of Judah, to Sierra Leone, and there sent out. So much confusion for a child, 8 years old, taken from your family. Now you're amongst people on a journey to Sierra Leone, where they don't speak your language, nothing. And then when you get there, Now you're sent to a different place. And they were intending to send them to Havana, so they stopped off in Sierra Leone, which is closer. So they went through that period of many years, decades, most probably till their death. And the difference between any other form of slavery that had existed is that they were taken as chattel slavery, which meant they were completely owned. Any children they had was automatically owned. Everything about them was owned. So their entire lives, everything was just owned, branded, disposed of anyhow. When they got to the point where obviously people may try to leave, run away, find a better situation, there were rewards. And we really believe it's out of this concept of, if you see a Black person, you have to question if they really were free or slave or they ran away. Because when the newspaper and people put up flyers saying reward $20, you're basically encouraging everyone in the public who wasn't a slave, obviously, to look out as any person who may be a slave, so you can police them. So these are part of the cause, of probably the main cause of all this anti-Black discrimination and perpetual policing of Black people by some people, because this wasn't that long ago, and people teach their children what they know because they have conversations. They would have said, oh, such and such ran away. Oh, I could do with $20. I'm going to go look to see if I can find him. And then they find a Black person. Oh, you must be the one, unless you can prove that you're not the one. You might be returned to someone, and you could have been a freed person who, for however you got your freedom, but if you didn't have documents, you're back a slave. Another one here, ran away from her master, John Rock, on Monday, the 18th of August. A Negro girl named Thursday. This is a girl. This is a girl. About 4.5 feet high, broad feet, with a lump on her right eye. Question you want to ask is, how did she get that lump on her right eye? Anyway. One of the things that we may want to consider is, what was the legal system doing? Well, in many places, but this one is an article from Canada, because sometimes people think that different things were happening in Canada. So in 1793, Canada passed an act to limit slavery in Upper Canada. It was the first legislation in the British colonies to restrict the slave trade. So they were restricting the slave trade, not abolishing it. But also, the Act recognized enslavement as a legal and socially accepted institution. So this document here is showing that enslavement was a legal and socially accepted institution. So chaining people, chaining small children with heavy metal, making them walk barefoot, beating them nearly to death, was an accepted and a legal institution. That needs to sink in. Some nations need to do some major repentance. So this is the empowerment of all communities to participate in policing and capture of Black people. So there are many, these are all different articles. First one says $100 reward. Negro boy Charles, 19 years old. Next one says $10 reward, ran away. About 45 years, I think is Maria, age about 45, yeah. The other one says $100 reward. They were just cruel. $50 reward, a very Black, beautiful skin. I'm saying beautiful skin, they just said very Black, about 6 feet, 6 inches high. Ooh, tall person, 30 years old. They captured people who worked and built everything, never paid, got beaten all their lives, treated like worse than garbage. And when they escaped, if you find them, you get money, but the person who's doing all this work still doesn't get money. Right, so move on. So those were newspaper advertisements and just a reflection that recognizing enslavement as a legal and socially accepted situation, to live in a society where enslavement was legal and socially accepted. Enslavement of that type, because people may say enslaved have existed, yes. but not to the branding, not to the beating, not to the chattel slavery, not to putting chains on little children's ankles and get big metal spikes. When all that era was over and there was freedom, abolishment of slavery, and the Black people started building their own communities, which in 1921, considering the Jim Crow laws, considering it wasn't long before, when you think of the last slave ship in 1860, so 1860 to 1921, 60 years, wasn't that long. So the whole dynamics was still an era of slavery, freedom, not finding work, not giving any support. Nobody handed anybody anything. No Black people got anything. So, however, in 1906, O.W. Gurley, a wealthy African American from Arkansas, moved to Tulsa and purchased 40 acres of land. So in 1906, he had enough money to purchase 40 acres of land. He must have worked very hard to get that. This article is titled Black Wall Street. In fact, this is something that people on the continent specifically need to understand, because a lot of times these histories are not known to most people. He purchased 40 acres of land and make sure he only sold to African Americans. So he provided opportunities for those migrating from harsh oppressions of Mississippi. The average income of Black families in the area exceeded what minimum wage is today. Wow. As a result of segregation, a dollar circulated 36 to 100 times and remained in Greenwood almost a year before leaving. This is a critical point. So they built a community where the services they used were within the community. And because Black people weren't allowed to go just about anywhere, they survived within the community, and their money grew within the community, and the community became more wealthy. And here it says, even more impressive, the state of Oklahoma only had 2 airports, yet 6 Black families owned their own planes. Again, we're talking the early 19-something, when a few years earlier, people were enslaved. And now they were in a position where they had their own planes. That is just incredible accomplishment. This is evidence that whites perceived African-American economy as an economic threat. So because they were doing so well, people didn't like it. Here we have in the middle incredible accomplishment under any circumstance, a Black and white photo of one of the churches that they built. Look at the congregation there, looking very beautiful, very polished. And down here is a picture of one of the streets in the area with cars hustling, bustling, like a mini cityscape. Beautiful. And of course, what happens? There was a white mob that came and just destroyed it, burnt it down, killed people. These senseless destruction, when these children, this mob, grew up in an era where human beings, it was the accepted legal and society accepted practice of slavery, when they see people who were perceived to be worthless, prospering, much more than they probably were, there was shock, and there's all kinds of emotions stirred, wickedness, and they destroyed and killed people and destroyed the community. And 2 days after the riot, what happens? One of the other things African Americans constantly face is as soon as they start to prosper in an area, they're rezoning. So that happened there as well. The mayor wasted no time in establishing the Reconstruction Committee to redesign Greenwood districts for industrial purposes. Basically, it takes a residential area and all the infrastructure they built and said, oh, now you'll have houses here. Well, this land is now deemed, so you can put a factory next to your house. So clearly, if your area where your once beautiful mansion was now has a factory next door, the value of your mansion would be slashed. That was the objective. So again, it goes on to say blacks were offered below market value for their properties. Oh dear. And again, imbalance and discrimination, whereas white community received. White men who offered almost any price for their property perceived survivors as desperate and destitute. There's a note here, a nation who a few years prior held other human beings as chattel slaves and subjected them to gross and unprecedented violent cruelty, justified based on beliefs that those people less than human, and taught that to their children. The seed of slavery has deep roots. Those seeds is where there's racial policing, racial profiling, because in those days, if you're Black and seen, you had to show your papers to justify why you are in a certain area. And in 2023, unfortunately, we hear the same things. People are stopped and saying, you look suspicious. What is suspicious? You're Black, that's suspicious. Or you're staring at someone the wrong way, or just a myriad of absolutely bizarre things that people say. And people call the police on Black people. All that goes back to the seed of slavery, because people were taught that despite the odds, we are a people of excellence. So this is an article in 2022. To think that, I think it's 106 years ago, Black people would have had nothing, $0. Yes, $0. They would have nothing. When slavery finished, people had nothing. They'll just have to start over. To go from that to today, where there are 1.79 Black millionaires, African-American millionaires in the US. That is an incredible accomplishment. And we don't think that people compliment African-Americans enough for the things they have achieved. It is hard to imagine any other group of people who haven't gone through what they have gone through to be able to come out and less than even, it's not even 160 years later, are making millionaires. They have achieved so much. Then moving over to this other side, from nothing while facing unprecedented discrimination, we are getting an education. Because you have to remember, back in slavery times, we weren't allowed to read. And even afterwards, with all the obstacle laws that have been put in place, if you look at Black schools in Black neighborhoods, they're underfunded, there's this, all these things are still going on. And yet, we're able to move our percentage of adults 25 and older completed high school. So we went from 84.5% to 90.3% for the Black population. That is something that is huge. That is something to be celebrated. 90%, over 90% of the Black population completed high school. Considering that 3 or 4 generations before, they would have had nothing. No one was educated in the family, not finished high school, just have to work. Remember, the child was working from age 6 if they survived. And that child's child would also have to work because it was chattel slavery. And when slavery was done, they were given nothing. So Black people had to go and do all kinds of menial jobs just to feed themselves and their families. So nothing had to be passed down. And when they tried to build something last in Tulsa, along come mobs who destroyed. Then along come the laws that rezoned the areas. So the fact that they actually educated from 84.5 to 90.3%, I am very proud. Well done, well done. Amazing people. Then we go on to here. It says the percentage of adults aged 25 and older with a bachelor's degree for Black people increased from 19.9 to 28.1%. Again, very proud of you, because getting a bachelor's degree requires a financial investment, requires a settled state of mind, requires so much to be able to, requires you to pass all the exams, requires sacrifice. And when you're looking at a people, again, who are just surviving and now thriving, this is a huge accomplishment. Yes, it's 28.1%, but it's a huge accomplishment. So as we wrap up this Black History Month, we just want to say, well done, African Americans and the entire diaspora. You've achieved things where it is only the grace of God that you exist. It is only the grace of God that you didn't all die. I didn't all die because I said you, but it is also I, because my ancestors were also enslaved in, with Black History Month really is a testimony of the grace of God to Black people and the incredible accomplishment that Black people have made and continue to make. I am so proud to be amongst your number. So if you like, please share and subscribe and continue to be awesome, whatever you do. And if you're part of the diaspora who were taken, again, our hearts do go out to all ancestors for their suffering and also for all the great things you've done. If you're on the continent, please learn, do some more research. And when you engage with people from the diaspora, these are the backstories that the media doesn't tell, because the media still wants to paint them as if you see them, capture them, or they're suspicious. And if you're not part of the diaspora, the continent, and you're just an ally, we welcome you to learn more and understand what various communities have gone through. So thank you very much for visiting, and do come back again next time. Take care. Bye.